Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss an interesting interview, I suppose, with a fisherman who is now accepting that the way Brexit has turned out has been destructive to their industry, but how their view of it, if replicated across the country, doesn't really help us to start to reverse the damage because they're still misdiagnosing the problems. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So fishing again, and in the next month, I mean, I've said in the past, September's going to be a big month for politics. There's a lot happening, and fishing is going to come back onto the agenda as well. And I mean, maybe you thought we'd done with that. In actual fact, this is at the moment only coming up again because I saw a fisherman say something about the Brexit deal that got me thinking of maybe a wider problem that we may still have before we can start to reverse it all. At the end of the day, Brexit is every bit the disaster that was predicted. When it came to fishing, for example, what was promised was that British fishing vessels could pretty much take what they wanted from our waters because we'd stop the foreign fishing vessels coming in, and they would still be allowed to sell it trade barrier free to countries in the single market. Now, the way this guy now sees the Brexit deal is that Boris Johnson folded at the last minute and didn't deliver what was promised. That the problem wasn't the unrealistic promise, but that Boris Johnson didn't follow through. Now, Boris Johnson doesn't follow through, that's true. It's also true to say that he absolutely folded at the end of the negotiations. Brexit is already crushing our economy and knackering our access to food and medical supplies. Actually, on that point, you notice that the hard Brexit press are now talking about the food shortages. It's not such big news to talk about the critical shortage of blood tubes, meaning that doctors have now been told to stop ordering blood tests unless absolutely urgent and vital. Because do you know what? We ain't got the stuff to let you do blood tests. That's where we are now. Because of Brexit, we're having to ration blood tests quite severely. I can't even imagine what toll that will lay on healthcare in this country. You know, and before anyone gives me international issues with that, I've not seen any other country telling their doctors to stop running blood tests, just like nobody else has shut their Nando's or failed to be able to order a McDonald's milkshake. And perhaps this is because they can't sensibly deny the food shortages. That's why they report on it, because too many people can see them. So they report on them and then try and nudge people away from where the blame really lies. You know, there are not enough people who know how Brexit is hitting medical supplies, so they can largely ignore that and if they have to, just deny it for now. But although Boris Johnson doesn't honour promises, and although, yes, he does fold at the last minute, the deal he promised was unobtainable. And I think this is where we've got a bit of a problem with dealing with Brexit. See, we need to show people the damage of Brexit. This will happen in greater numbers as more harm is done. It's unfortunate that it is taking a mind-blowing amount of harm to show people what was easy enough to see had they just listened to experts. But they are seeing it. As the shortages get worse, and they're nowhere near the catastrophe that they can get, people will increasingly have to accept that Brexit is at least not going well. Now, to someone who understands what the core issues are, you might think that this would be a change in the tide, that people will recognise the damage of Brexit and want to reverse it. It's not really the case necessarily. See, if they think that we just haven't gotten Brexit quite right yet, then that will be what they want us to do. So take this fisherman, for example. The deal he thought he was getting was as follows. EU fishing fleets would not be allowed to fish in British waters. So we'll put in EU fishermen out of a job. However, the British fishing industry would still be allowed to sell its fish freely to the EU's market. Who on earth would accept a deal like that? Why would the EU accept the loss of fishing rights for their own fleets and not raise trade barriers to our sale of them? You know, the reality is that there were three options when it came to the fishing industry. One, we could have kept things as they were. We have quotas agreed with the EU on much the same lines as before. We remain in the customs union and single market, and we carry on fishing, processing and selling the catch as we had been doing. The second thing, we could have gone completely the other way, we could have denied access to our waters for foreign fishing vessels, which would have meant no trade agreement at all. That would have meant not only full checks on all our exports to the EU, but various types of fish banned altogether, and lengthy paperwork and prohibitively expensive tariffs on the rest. British fishermen would have been able to catch more fish, but would not have been able to sell as much. And this is not conjecture, because remember, we did get something that was very close to a no deal in the end. As soon as we left the single market, fishing vessels were being told to catch less fish because they weren't able to sell them to the EU as easily. Due to problems with certification or the paperwork, the flow of fish to the EU slowed down considerably. So we had to fish less to avoid a lot of the catch going, because that was what was happening to begin with. A lot of the fish was just rotting on the wharf. That happened. That's not something that would happen under these circumstances. That did happen. And that was without damaging tariffs on the exports. The third option is what we went for. Now, because we left the single market, we had to follow third country rules, which meant some fish couldn't be sold at all. The process of exporting became more expensive and time consuming, so we couldn't sell as much. What we could sell was sometimes less fresh by the time it got to the markets of the continent, and so commanded lower prices. So we could catch less, sell it for less. But it could still be sold tariff-free. So, it wasn't the best option, but it wasn't the worst either. What this fisherman wanted was the worst option, because in his own head, he somehow thinks the EU, those people who run the largest free trade area in the world, would have agreed to piss off their own fishermen, destroying whole fishing communities in their countries, and still agree to a deal that allowed us to sell our produce that their fishermen should have been catching to them as if we were still in the single market, but without having to agree to any of the obligations of membership. It's the classic cancelling your gym membership and then being outraged that you can't use the gym. And then you get to wondering, so has anyone vocalised this reasoning to him? Has anyone actually set that out to him? Has he never thought it through? Did he fall for it in 2016 and has never dared reconsider if it is still best or not? And then you wonder how many more people behave in the same way when they are personally harmed by Brexit. This guy is part of an industry now that's going under. That's all there is to it. With some people talking about food shortages, things like that. He's still going to be facing the food shortages, but he's also going to be facing the loss of work. In his case, I believe he said, I'm hoping I'm not mixing up with another interview now, that he'd be okay because he'd sort of gone through his career anyway, but he worries for the next generation. But nonetheless, he's still seeing the destruction of his industry. I mean, I know that linking it to Brexit comes later anyway, because there's a process here. With every consequence of Brexit, the backers in the media push a particular sequence. First of all, the problem is denied. Doesn't even exist. What are you talking about? Second, then when it becomes so obvious, that the problem clearly does exist to enough people to where you can't credibly deny it, you switch to saying, yeah, but it's caused by this other thing instead. Then when the cause you blamed it on goes away, but the problem's still there, then you switch to saying that it's Brexit, but it's not Brexit, it's the type of Brexit we did. It's the way we did Brexit that's the problem. We need people to move beyond that third step. If they can't understand, and not everyone should be expected to research the details, at least they need to accept that they were told that Brexit would do all of these things, and it has done all of these things. So maybe we should listen to the people who said it would do all of these things, and not to the people who said it would do something completely different. That the shysters talked about Project Fear, but they lied. Project Fear was not simply a prediction, it was what was inevitable. And to move to a place where they understand that the only way to reverse the damage is to reverse the cause, but for that they have to know that the cause is Brexit, not just this Brexit or this other effect. The cause is not failing to get the deal that was promised. The deal that was promised was a fantasy. There is only one country on earth stupid enough to sign a trade agreement that gives everything that the other side wanted whilst gaining next to nothing in compensation. And that's us. It was actually quite depressing listening to this guy in the interview. His industry is going under, whole swathes of it. It's not to say we'll have no fishing after this, but whole swathes of it are going under. It's very difficult to sell to the EU. If we give them what they want, which is taking back all the fishing rights in 2026 when it next comes up, we will have, the only fishing industry we'll have left is the catch that we can sell to ourselves. And do you know what? Most of the stuff that's fished in British waters, we don't really have an appetite for. You know, but in the 8 months that this guy has been awake to the realities of Brexit, he does not appear to have spent any time learning what actually happened. Nigel Farage long ago stopped talking about fishing. Like, he's not part of the government. He could have carried on championing fishermen. Oh, yeah, it's the way Boris Johnson did it. Oh, yeah, he knows that's rubbish. He's not bothering with that. You know, he, like the Conservatives, used the industry to get what they wanted. Now they've got it, fishermen are surplus to requirements. They don't need them anymore. You know, it's like bog paper. They've been used and are now being flushed away with all the rest of the shit. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.